Commander Jake Morrison stood in the center of the Grand Assembly Hall, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his entire life. The massive dome stretched above him, filled with creatures that looked like they had stepped out of nightmares and dreams. Some floated in the air, their bodies made of what looked like living crystal. Others towered over him on multiple legs, their eyes glowing with colors he had never seen before. The noise was incredible, a mix of sounds that no human throat could make. He had practiced this moment for months. Earth's entire future in the galaxy depended on what happened in the next few hours. His hands were steady as he held the datapad containing humanity's application to join the Federation's elite Guardian Corps. The same hands that had once piloted fighter jets through asteroid fields now trembled slightly as hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. "Representatives of the Galactic Federation," Morrison began, his voice carrying across the hall through the translation system. "I come before you today to present humanity's case for membership in the elite Guardian Corps." The sound that followed was unlike anything Morrison had ever heard. It started as a low rumble from the Korath section, where 8-foot-tall creatures with razor-sharp claws sat in groups. The rumble grew louder as other species joined in. The Zephyrians, who looked like walking mountains of blue crystal, created a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Even the peaceful Andorians, with their large eyes and gentle faces, made soft clicking sounds that Morrison's translator told him meant amusement. They were laughing at him. Elder Vaxon, the ancient being who led the Federation Council, raised one of his 4 arms for silence. His voice, when it came, sounded like distant thunder. "Commander Morrison, humanity has been part of our Federation for only 2 years. The elite Guardian Corps consists of the galaxy's most proven protectors. Perhaps you could explain why your species believes it belongs among them." Morrison straightened his shoulders. He had expected this question. "Honored Elder, humanity has survived on a world that has tried to kill us since we first stood upright. We have fought wars, natural disasters, and each other. We have learned to protect what matters most to us. We have faced extinction multiple times and survived through courage and determination." A voice boomed from the Korath section. "Survival does not equal strength, human." The speaker was a female Korath with scars covering her arms. Her name was Elder Thizes, and she was considered one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. "Your world is soft compared to ours. Our young fight predators that would tear your strongest warriors apart. Your species coddles its offspring like they are made of glass." More sounds of agreement filled the hall. Morrison felt his face grow hot, but he pressed on. "Elder Thizes, we do protect our young. We believe that is what makes us strong, not weak. Every human culture has stories of people who gave their lives to protect children. We have built our entire civilization around the idea that the young must be kept safe." "Exactly our point," came a new voice. This one belonged to a Drakmari, a species that could survive in the vacuum of space and change their appearance at will. "You are a species of caretakers, not guardians. The elite Guardian Corps protects entire worlds, not just nurseries." The laughter grew louder. Morrison looked around the hall and saw the same expression on every face, regardless of species. They saw humans as weak, soft, and unsuitable for the serious business of galactic protection. "Commander Morrison," Elder Vaxon said, his voice cutting through the noise, "the Guardian Corps has protected this galaxy for over 1,000 years. Our current members have proven themselves in battle against the most dangerous threats the universe has thrown at us. The Korath have natural weapons and reflexes that make them perfect hunters. The Zephyrians can withstand weapons that would destroy starships. The Drakmari can infiltrate any environment and strike without warning." He paused, and Morrison felt the weight of every eye in the hall on him. What do humans bring to the table that these species do not already provide? Morrison had prepared for this question too, but looking around the hall, his prepared answers seemed small and inadequate. "We bring adaptability, sir. We bring the ability to work together with other species. We bring experience in protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The Zephyrian delegate, a being whose body looked like it was carved from sapphire, spoke next. Commander, with respect, protecting the weak is not the same as being a guardian. A guardian must be strong enough to face any threat. Your species has barely left its home system. You have never faced a real galactic threat. The Vorthan delegation agrees, said a new voice. The Vorthan were beings of pure electromagnetic energy who had to wear special suits to interact with other species. Humans show great potential in administrative roles. Perhaps your species would be better suited to managing supply lines or diplomatic relations. Morrison felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice level. Honored delegates, I understand your concerns, but I ask you to consider this in every human culture across every continent on our world. The highest honor we can give someone is to call them a protector of children. We have sayings in hundreds of languages that all mean the same thing. Harm a child and you face the fury of every adult in the community. He looked directly at Elder Thizes. You say we coddle our young? I say we understand what is truly worth fighting for. Any species can learn to destroy. Not every species knows how to protect. The hall fell silent for a moment. Then Elder Thizes stood, her massive form casting a shadow over the human section. Pretty words, Commander. But words do not stop plasma cannons or psychic attacks. The Elite Guardian Corps needs warriors, not poets. The session continued for another hour, but Morrison could see that the outcome was already decided. Every question was designed to highlight humanity's weaknesses compared to the established guardian species. When he mentioned human endurance, they pointed out that Korath could fight for days without rest. When he talked about human intelligence, they reminded him that Andorians had developed faster than light, travel while humans were still using stone tools. Finally, Elder Vaxon called for a recess. The Council will consider humanity's application and provide a decision within the standard period. As the delegates filed out of the hall, Morrison caught fragments of conversations through his translator. The words stung more than he wanted to admit. Did you hear him talking about protecting children like it was some kind of military strategy? I heard humans won't even let their young out of sight until they're adults. How can a species like that protect anything? Maybe we should create a new position for them. The Galactic Babysitting Corps. The laughter that followed that comment echoed through the hall long after most of the delegates had left. Morrison gathered his materials and walked slowly back to his quarters. The human section of the station was small, just a few rooms assigned to Earth's diplomatic mission. His aide, Lieutenant Ben Parker, was waiting for him with a concerned expression. How did it go, sir? Morrison sat down heavily in his chair. About as well as expected, Lieutenant. They think we're too soft, too protective of our young. They see our greatest strength as our greatest weakness. Parker poured him a cup of coffee, one of the few Earth luxuries they had brought with them. What happens now? Now we wait. But I think we both know what their answer will be. Morrison stared out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, a small blue world that had produced a species the galaxy saw as weak and overprotective. Sir, if I may ask, do you think they're right? Are we too protective? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Ben, I've seen what happens when adults fail to protect their young. I've seen the cost of abandoning those who depend on us. If caring too much about the next generation makes us weak in their eyes, then I'll take that weakness over their strength any day. But as he sat there looking out at the vast galaxy that seemed to have no place for humanity's particular brand of strength, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that maybe the other species were right. Maybe humans really were too soft for the harsh realities of galactic politics. He had no way of knowing that within a few months, the entire galaxy would discover just how wrong they were about humanity's weakness. 3 months had passed since the humiliating rejection at the Grand Assembly. Commander Jake Morrison had returned to Earth to deliver the bad news, but he had not given up hope. He spent his days working on new proposals, new ways to prove humanity's worth to the galaxy. The Federation had not completely closed the door on human membership, but Morrison knew they were watching Earth carefully. Waiting to see what humans would do next, the emergency beacon reached Federation headquarters on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. Morrison was reviewing supply reports when his communication device started screaming with priority alerts. The sound was unlike anything he had heard before. A mix of electronic screams and what sounded like actual pain. Captain Lisa Bennett burst into his office without knocking. Her face was pale and she was holding a datapad that shook in her hands. "Commander, you need to see this. The Vorthan homeworld is under attack." Morrison took the pad and read the message. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made his stomach drop. "This is High Counselor Zex Kara of the Vorthan High Command. Theros Prime is under assault by an unknown enemy. They are hunting our young. We are losing. Please send help." The Vorthan were not a weak species. They were beings of pure electromagnetic energy who could control electrical systems with their thoughts. Their warriors could disable entire starships by thinking about it. They had been members of the Federation for over 300 years, and they had never asked for help before. Within hours, more messages came through the emergency network. The attackers were called the Shadows, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had faced before. They fed on electromagnetic energy, which meant they could drain a Vorthan's life force just by getting close. Worse, they seemed to be specifically targeting young Vorthan, who had not yet developed their full electrical abilities. Morrison watched the tactical reports with growing horror. The Shadows were not just attacking randomly. They were smart, organized, and they had studied Vorthan psychology. They knew that adult Vorthan would abandon any strategic position to protect their young. Every time the Shadows threatened a group of young Vorthan, the adults would rush to defend them, leaving other areas unprotected. The Federation's response was swift. Elder Vaxon called for an emergency session of the Guardian Corps within 6 hours. The greatest warriors in the galaxy were on their way to Theros Prime. The Korath sent their best hunters, led by Elder Thyses herself. The Zephyrians dispatched their most powerful defensive units. The Drakmari sent their elite infiltration teams. Morrison watched the news feeds from his office on Earth. He wanted to help, but humanity was not part of the Guardian Corps. Earth's small fleet was limited to patrol duties in their own solar system. All he could do was watch and hope that the Federation's warriors would be enough. The first reports from Theros Prime were encouraging. The Guardian Corps had arrived and engaged the Shadows in multiple battles. The Korath's natural fighting instincts were proving effective against the energy-based creatures. The Zephyrians' defensive capabilities were protecting key locations. The Drakmari were conducting successful raids on shadow positions, but something was wrong. As the days passed, the situation on Theros Prime got worse instead of better. The Shadows were not being defeated. In fact, they seemed to be winning. Captain Bennett brought Morrison the latest intelligence report. Her expression was grim as she set the datapad on his desk. "Sir, the Guardian Corps is struggling. They're powerful fighters, but they're running into the same problem as the Vorthan." Morrison read the report carefully. The problem was clear. Once it was explained. The Guardian Corps were all apex predators, species that had evolved to hunt and kill. They were perfect at destroying enemies, but they were not good at protecting non-combatants while fighting. When they had to choose between pursuing an enemy and protecting young Vorthan, they made the same choice as the adult Vorthan. They protected the young, but this made their tactics predictable. The Korath were the worst affected. Their hunting instincts made them want to chase down every shadow they saw, but when young Vorthan were in danger, they had to abandon the hunt. Elder Thyses had reported that her warriors were becoming frustrated and confused. They were trained to kill, not to protect. The Zephyrians were having different problems. Their defensive strategies worked well for protecting static positions, but the Shadows were mobile and smart. They would attack multiple locations at once, forcing the Zephyrians to spread their defenses thin. When they concentrated their forces to protect the young, the Shadows would attack elsewhere. Even the Drakmari were struggling. Their infiltration skills were perfect for striking at enemy positions, but they were not trained to coordinate with defensive forces. They could eliminate shadow scouts and isolated units, but they could not protect vulnerable populations while doing so. Morrison stared at the report for a long time. The greatest warriors in the galaxy were losing because they were trying to do something they were not designed for. They were hunters and killers, not protectors. The same instincts that made them perfect guardians for the Federation made them imperfect guardians for the helpless. "Lisa," he said slowly, "what do you think would happen if we sent a human team to Taros Prime?" Bennett looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Sir, we're not part of the Guardian Corps. We don't have authorization to deploy outside the solar system for military operations. But we could volunteer as humanitarian aid workers. The Federation allows member species to provide disaster relief." Bennett was quiet for a moment, considering the idea. "Sir, you're talking about sending humans into a war zone where the galaxy's best warriors are getting beaten. What could we possibly do that they can't?" Morrison stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see children playing in the station's recreation area. Human children, running and laughing under the careful watch of their parents and teachers. No adult human would ever let harm come to those children if they could prevent it. "Lisa, what's the first thing we do when there's a disaster on Earth?" "We evacuate the civilians, especially the children." "And what's the first thing we do when we're in a combat zone with non-combatants present?" "We establish safe zones and protective corridors." "And what's the first thing we teach our soldiers about urban warfare?" Bennett's eyes widened as she understood. "We teach them how to fight while protecting civilians. We teach them that the mission isn't complete until everyone is safe." Morrison nodded. "The Guardian Corps are the best fighters in the galaxy, but they're not the best protectors. They're apex predators, not shepherds. They don't know how to fight a war while keeping the weak safe." "But sir, even if you're right, the Federation will never authorize a human military deployment. They barely consider us a real military force." Morrison smiled for the first time in weeks. "Then we don't ask for military authorization. We ask for permission to provide humanitarian assistance. We send doctors, engineers, and disaster relief specialists. We just happen to send ones who know how to fight." The plan came together quickly. Morrison assembled a team of 50 humans, officially designated as the Terran Humanitarian Relief Corps. The team was led by Captain Bennett, who had experience in disaster relief operations. The roster included Sergeant Alex Carter, a former Special Forces operator who had specialized in protecting civilians in war zones, Dr. Maria Rodriguez, a child psychologist who had studied protective behaviors in crisis situations, Lieutenant Ben Parker, an engineer who designed emergency shelters and evacuation systems. On paper, they were disaster relief workers. In reality, they were some of Earth's most experienced soldiers, chosen specifically for their ability to protect non-combatants under fire. The Federation approved the humanitarian mission within hours. They were desperate for any help they could get, and the idea of human aid workers seemed harmless enough. Elder Vaxon himself authorized the deployment, though Morrison suspected he saw it as a token gesture rather than a real solution. As the human relief ship prepared to depart for Taros Prime, Morrison addressed his team over the communication system. "I want you all to understand what we're walking into. The greatest warriors in the galaxy are losing this fight. They're not losing because they're weak or cowardly. They're losing because they're trying to do something they weren't designed for." He paused, looking at the faces of his team on the screens. "We're not going to Taros Prime to prove that humans are better fighters than the Korath or the Zephyrians. We're going to prove that sometimes the best way to win a war is to protect what matters most." The ship launched 3 hours later, carrying 50 humans toward a war zone, where the galaxy's apex predators were learning that strength and protection were not the same thing. None of them knew that they were about to change the way the entire galaxy thought about power, warfare, and what it really meant to be strong. The transport ship carrying the human relief team dropped out of hyperspace near Taros Prime, and Captain Lisa Bennett felt her breath catch in her throat. The planet below them was covered in dark clouds that crackled with unnatural lightning. Ships from a dozen different species filled the space around the world, their weapons firing constantly at moving shadows that seemed to dance between the stars. "My God," whispered Dr. Maria Rodriguez, pressing her face to the viewport. It's like the whole planet is screaming. She was not wrong. The Vorthen were beings of electromagnetic energy, and their pain was broadcasting across every frequency. The ship's communication system picked up fragments of their distress calls, a constant stream of fear and desperation that made the humans' hearts ache. Sergeant Alex Carter studied the tactical displays with the focused attention of a soldier who had seen too many battlefields. "Captain, look at the troop movements. The Guardian Corps is fighting like they're trying to hunt down every shadow individually. They're scattered across the entire planet." Bennett nodded. She could see the problem immediately. The Korath were moving in small hunting packs, chasing individual shadows across the landscape. The Zephyrians had established defensive positions around major cities, but they were static and predictable. The Drakmari were conducting raids on shadow strongholds, but they were not coordinating with the defensive forces. "It's like watching 3 different armies fight 3 different wars," said Lieutenant Ben Parker. "Nobody's working together." The human ship received clearance to land at the main Federation base, a temporary structure built on the ruins of what had once been Theros Prime's capital city. As they descended through the atmosphere, the humans could see the devastation below. Entire sections of the city were dark, drained of all electrical energy. The shadows had fed well here. Elder Thyses was waiting for them at the landing pad, her massive form towering over the human delegation. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. "Captain Bennett, I will be honest with you. I do not know what your people can do here that we cannot, but we are losing and we need help." Bennett saluted. The Korath leader. "Elder Thyses, we're not here to replace your warriors. We're here to support them. May I ask you a question?" The elder nodded. "When you're hunting a dangerous predator, do you bring your young with you?" Elder Thyses looked confused. "Of course not. The young would be in danger and would distract us from the hunt." "Then why are you trying to hunt the shadows while protecting the young Vorthen at the same time?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Elder Tice's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Bennett thought she might have offended the powerful warrior. Then slowly understanding dawned on the Korath's face. "You are suggesting we separate the hunting from the protecting." "I'm suggesting we let the hunters hunt and the protectors protect." Bennett replied. Within hours, the human team was deployed across the planet. They did not engage the shadows directly. Instead, they did what humans had been doing for thousands of years. They gathered the vulnerable in safe places and built defenses around them. Dr. Rodriguez worked with the young Vorthen, studying their energy patterns and fear responses. She discovered something that the other species had missed. The shadows hunted by sensing the electromagnetic panic of their prey. Fear had a specific frequency that the creatures could detect from great distances. "It's like they're emotional vampires," she explained to Carter as they watched a group of young Vorthen playing in a newly established safe zone. "They feed on energy, but they find their food by sensing terror." Carter nodded, understanding immediately. "So if we can keep the young ones calm, the shadows can't find them as easily?" Working with Lieutenant Parker, Dr. Rodriguez developed a system of dampening fields that masked the emotional frequencies of the young Vorthen. The technology was simple by Federation standards, but it was effective. For the first time since the invasion began, young Vorthen could hide from the shadows. The real breakthrough came when Carter suggested consolidating all the young Vorthen into a series of heavily defended compounds. The idea was radical. Every instinct of the adult Vorthen rebelled against the thought of gathering their children in large groups where they might be vulnerable to a single attack. "It goes against everything we believe," said Commander Zexkara, the Vorthen leader. "We protect our young by keeping them scattered, hidden, safe in small groups." Carter understood the fear, but he also understood tactics. "Commander, right? Now your young are scattered across the planet, and every adult Vorthen is trying to protect a few of them. That means your warriors are scattered too. The shadows are using your protective instincts against you." He pulled up a holographic display, showing the current deployment of forces. "Look at this." Every time the shadows threaten a group of young Vorthen, a dozen adult warriors abandon their positions to protect them. The shadows know this. They're using your children as bait. The truth of Carter's words was painful but undeniable. The Vorthen's greatest strength, their fierce protection of their young, had become a weakness that the shadows exploited with ruthless efficiency. "What do you propose?" asked Zexkara. "We create secure zones where all the young Vorthen can be protected. Together, human forces will be responsible for their safety. That frees up every adult Vorthen to fight without distraction." The debate that followed was intense. Adult Vorthen argued that they could not trust the safety of their children to another species. Some questioned whether humans were capable of protecting them from the shadows. Others worried that concentrating the young would create an irresistible target. "Captain," Bennett addressed their concerns directly, "I understand your fear. You're being asked to trust your most precious possessions to strangers. But ask yourself this. In the 3 months since this war began, how many young Vorthen have you lost?" The silence that followed was answer enough. The plan was implemented gradually. The first safe zone was established in an abandoned mining complex that the humans had reinforced with their own defensive technology. 50 young Vorthen were relocated there, along with 20 human protectors laid by Sergeant Carter. The difference was immediate. The adult Vorthen who had been guarding those 50 young ones were now free to join the offensive operations. For the first time since the invasion began, the Vorthen could fight without constantly looking over their shoulders. The shadows attacked the safe zone within hours, but they found something they had not expected. The humans did not fight like the other species. They did not charge out to meet the enemy. Instead, they used defensive tactics that had been refined over centuries of human warfare. Carter's team had prepared multiple fallback positions within the complex. When the shadows broke through the first line of defense, the humans fell back to the second line, drawing the attackers deeper into the prepared killing ground. The young Vorthen were moved to the most secure area of the complex, protected by layers of defensive positions. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the safe zone was damaged but intact. More importantly, not a single young Vorthen had been harmed. The shadows had expected to find easy prey, but instead they had found a fortress defended by humans who fought with a combination of tactical skill and protective fury that surprised everyone. Word of the success spread quickly. Elder Thizes requested a meeting with Captain Bennett the next morning. The Korath leader looked tired but interested. "Your people fought well yesterday," she said, "but I do not understand your tactics. You had opportunities to pursue the shadows when they retreated, but you let them escape." Bennett smiled. "Elder Thizes, we weren't trying to kill every shadow. We were trying to protect the young Vorthen. Those are 2 different missions. But by letting the shadows escape, you allowed them to attack elsewhere." "Yes, but we also proved that they couldn't get to the young ones. And now you know where they are. Your hunters can go after them without worrying about protecting anyone." The understanding that dawned on Elder Tice's face was the same expression that had appeared on Commander Zexkara's face days earlier. The humans were not trying to replace the Guardian Corps. They were trying to free them to do what they did best. The new strategy was tested on a massive scale when the Shadows launched their largest assault yet. They attacked the main Vorthen city with thousands of creatures, more than had ever been seen in a single battle. The Federation forces prepared for their most desperate fight yet, but this time something was different. The adult Vorthen did not rush to protect scattered groups of young ones. The young were all safe in human-defended compounds. The Korath did not have to choose between hunting and protecting. The Zephyrians could focus their defensive capabilities on military targets rather than civilian populations. For the first time since the invasion began, the full might of the Guardian Corps was unleashed without restriction. The Korath hunted the shadows with savage efficiency. The Zephyrians created defensive barriers that the creatures could not breach. The Drakmari struck at shadow command structures without worrying about civilian casualties. The battle was over in 4 hours. The shadows, faced with coordinated Resistance from warriors who were no longer distracted by protection duties were completely defeated. The news of humanity's success on Theros Prime spread through the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within a week, every species in the Federation had heard the story. The humans, the species that everyone had dismissed as too weak and protective, had solved a problem that the galaxy's greatest warriors could not handle. Commander Jake Morrison was reviewing the latest reports when his communication device started buzzing with incoming messages. The first was from the Vorthan High Council, formally requesting that human advisors remain on Theros Prime to help restructure their planetary defense systems. The second was from the Aquarian Commonwealth, asking if Earth could provide assistance with their own protection problems. Captain Lisa Bennett had returned to Earth a hero, but she looked exhausted as she sat across from Morrison's desk. "Sir, I've been getting requests from 17 different species in the past 3 days. Everyone wants human protection specialists." Morrison studied the requests. Each one told a similar story. Species that had powerful military forces but struggled to protect their most vulnerable members during conflicts. The galaxy's apex predators were excellent at destroying enemies, but they had never learned how to fight while keeping the helpless safe. "Tell me about the Aquarian situation," Morrison said. Bennett pulled up a holographic display showing the Aquarian homeworlds. "They're a peaceful species that lives entirely underwater. Their military is actually quite capable, but they're being raided by the Skarn, a species that specifically targets Aquarian nursery worlds. The problem is that young Aquarians can't survive in deep water for their first few years of life. They have to stay in shallow coastal areas where they're vulnerable." The pattern was becoming clear to Morrison. "Let me guess. Every time the Skarn attack a nursery area, the adult Aquarians abandon their defensive positions to protect their young." "Exactly. The Aquarians are excellent fighters in deep water, but they can't use their natural advantages when they're stuck protecting shallow water nurseries." Morrison approved the mission immediately. Within days, Captain Danny Walsh was leading a team of human marine specialists to the Aquarian homeworld. The team included Dr. Nicole Thompson, who had studied underwater defensive systems, and Sergeant Amy Foster, an expert in amphibious warfare. The Aquarian solution required different tactics than the Vorthan mission, but the principle was the same. The humans established secure underwater bases in the deep ocean, where young Aquarians could be protected while still developing properly. The bases were connected to the surface by tunnels that allowed for emergency evacuation if needed. The key innovation was mobility. Unlike the Vorthan safe zones, which were stationary, the Aquarian protection system was designed to move. The young Aquarians could be relocated quickly if the Skarn discovered their location. This meant that the adult Aquarians never knew exactly where their children were, but they knew they were safe. The psychological effect was immediate. Adult Aquarians who had spent months worrying about their young suddenly found themselves free to focus on military operations. When the Skarn launched their next raid, they found the coastal areas empty and the Aquarian military waiting for them in the deep ocean where the water dwellers had every advantage. The raid was a disaster for the Skarn. They had built their entire strategy around the Aquarians' need to protect their coastal nurseries. When those nurseries were empty and defended by humans in underwater fortifications, the Skarn found themselves facing an enemy that could move freely and fight on their own terms. News of the Aquarian success reached the Sylvani just as they were facing their own crisis. The Sylvani were a plant-based species whose young took decades to mature, growing like trees in vast forest cities. They were being threatened by the Harvester clans, nomadic species that viewed young Sylvani as valuable resources to be collected and sold. The Sylvani request was different from the others. They did not want their young moved to safe locations. The young Sylvani were literally rooted to the ground and could not be relocated without killing them. Instead, they needed a way to protect their forest cities without destroying the delicate ecosystem that their young required. Dr. Maria Rodriguez volunteered to lead the Sylvani mission. She had become fascinated by the different ways that species protected their young, and the Sylvani presented a unique challenge. The team she assembled included botanists, ecologists, and military engineers who specialized in environmental warfare. The solution they developed was revolutionary. Instead of trying to protect the young Sylvani with traditional military means, they created a living defense system. Working with adult Sylvani, the humans helped design defensive plants that could detect intruders and alert the community. They established hidden observation posts throughout the forest that allowed human advisors to coordinate defensive responses without disrupting the natural environment. The most important innovation was the early warning network. The humans taught the Sylvani how to use their natural plant communication system as a military asset. When harvester clans approached a forest city, the entire ecosystem would know about it hours before the raiders arrived. This gave the adult Sylvani time to organize their defenses, while keeping their young safely hidden in the deepest parts of the forest. The harvester clans had never faced anything like it. They were used to raiding agricultural worlds where the defenders were concentrated in obvious locations. The Sylvani forest cities appeared undefended, but when the raiders tried to approach the young trees, they found themselves facing a coordinated defense that seemed to come from the forest itself, each success built on the previous one. The phrase "human safe" began appearing in Federation communications as shorthand for the highest level of protection available. Species that had never considered asking for help began reaching out to Earth's growing force of protection specialists. The Christic, a silicon-based species that reproduced by creating gemstone eggs, requested human assistance when their nursery asteroids came under attack. The humans developed mobile defense platforms that could protect the asteroid fields while allowing the adult Christic to hunt down the raiders. The Harmony Collective, a species of energy beings that existed as pure thought, faced threats from psychic predators that fed on developing minds. Human psychologists worked with them to create mental shielding techniques that protected young Harmony beings while they learned to defend themselves. Even species that had initially mocked humanity's protective instincts began to reconsider their positions. The Thanari Empire, a militaristic culture that prided itself on producing the toughest warriors in the galaxy, quietly requested human advisors. When their war colleges came under attack by an enemy that specifically targeted military students, Commander Morrison found himself managing the largest deployment of human forces in history. Every week brought new requests for assistance, and every mission seemed to reveal new ways that humanity's protective instincts could be applied to galactic problems. The Federation Council took notice. Elder Vaxon called an emergency session to discuss what they were calling the human phenomenon. The session was closed to outside observers, but Morrison received a summary of the proceedings from his diplomatic contacts. The debate had been intense. Some species argued that humanity was becoming too influential too quickly. Others pointed out that human methods were proving more effective than traditional approaches. The Korath delegation, led by Elder Thizes, had made a surprising statement. "We have spent centuries believing that strength meant the ability to destroy our enemies," she had said. "The humans have shown us that true strength might mean the ability to protect what we value most. Perhaps it is time we reconsidered what we mean when we talk about power." The most significant development came from an unexpected source. The Ethereal Council, the ancient beings who served as the Federation's highest authority, issued a formal statement requesting a comprehensive study of human protective capabilities. The study was led by Elder Vaxon himself, who had been skeptical of humanity from the beginning. His team spent months reviewing every human mission, interviewing alien leaders who had worked with human advisors, and analyzing the tactical innovations that humans had introduced. Morrison received a copy of the preliminary report, and he was amazed by what he read. The study concluded that humans possessed a unique combination of protective instincts, tactical flexibility, and emotional intelligence that made them ideal guardians for non-combatants in crisis situations. More importantly, the report noted that human methods were not just effective, but were actually changing how other species thought about protection and warfare. The concept of separating protection duties from combat operations was being adopted by military forces throughout the Federation. Captain Bennett brought Morrison the latest deployment request as he finished reading the report. This one was different from all the others. It came from the Federation Council itself. Sir, they're asking for human advisors to help design new protection protocols for the entire Federation. They want us to train other species in our methods. Morrison looked at the request for a long time. 6 months ago, humanity had been rejected from the elite Guardian Corps because they were seen as too weak and protective. The emergency session of the Federation Council was unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives from 847 species filled the Grand Assembly Hall, their voices creating a noise that sounded like the end of the world. At the center of it all, Commander Jake Morrison stood next to Elder Vaxon, watching holographic displays that showed the approaching threat. The hive was massive beyond comprehension. Their ships stretched across space like a dark cloud, blotting out stars as they moved. Intelligence reports estimated that their fleet contained over 10 million vessels, each one designed for a single purpose: the complete consumption of organic life. They have destroyed 17 star systems in the past month, Elder Vaxon announced to the Assembly. But they are not simply destroying everything. They are specifically targeting the young of every species they encounter. The hall fell silent. Every delegate understood what this meant. The hive was not just conquering territory or gathering resources. They were trying to prevent future generations from existing, ensuring that no species could rebuild after their passage. Elder Thises of the Korth stood, her massive form commanding attention. The Federation's combined military might is enough to defeat the hive, but only if we can commit our full forces to the battle. However, every species will be reluctant to leave their young undefended. Murmurs of agreement filled the hall. It was the same problem that had plagued every conflict since the Vorthan Crisis, but on a galactic scale. How could the Federation's warriors fight effectively when they were worried about protecting their children? There is a solution, Elder Thises continued, and her next words surprised everyone in the hall. I propose that humanity be given temporary custody of the young from all Federation species during the final battle against the hive. The silence that followed was absolute. Never in the 3,000-year history of the Federation had one species been asked to protect the children of all others. The idea was unprecedented, radical, and terrifying. The debate that erupted was fierce. The Zephyrian delegate argued that no single species could be trusted with such responsibility. The Thanari representative questioned whether humans had the resources to protect millions of young beings from hundreds of different species. Others worried about the logistics of moving so many children across such vast distances. High Counselor Zex Kara of the Vorthan rose to speak, and the hall gradually quieted. 6 months ago, my people were dying. Our young were being hunted by the shadows, and we could not protect them while fighting effectively. The humans saved us, not by fighting our battles, but by freeing us to fight our own battles. She paused, looking around the hall at the faces of delegates who had once laughed at humanity's weakness. Since then, human protectors have served on 43 worlds. They have never failed. They have never lost a single child placed in their care. Not one. The Aquarian delegate spoke next. My people were skeptical when the humans first arrived. Our young are delicate, requiring specific underwater conditions to survive. We thought no land-dwelling species could understand our needs. We were wrong. The humans not only protected our children, but helped them thrive in ways we had never imagined. One by one, representatives from species that had worked with human protectors stood to speak. The Savani described how humans had protected their tree children without damaging the forest they needed to survive. The Christic explained how human mobile defense platforms had kept their gemstone eggs safe while allowing the adults to hunt freely. The testimony was overwhelming, but the magnitude of what was being proposed was still difficult to accept. Commander Morrison found himself called to address the assembly, just as he had months earlier when applying to join the Guardian Corps. This time, However, the mood in the hall was very different. "Honored delegates," Morrison began, "I understand your fear. You are being asked to trust your most precious possessions to a species that many of you considered weak just months ago. You are being asked to place your children in the hands of strangers." He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of species. "But I want you to understand something about humans. We do not see your children as strangers. We see them as children. That is all we need to know, too. Protect them with our lives." Morrison gestured to the tactical displays showing the approaching hive. "You are right to be afraid. The hive is the greatest threat the galaxy has ever faced. But they are not just threatening your military forces or your technology. They are threatening your future. They are coming for your children." His voice grew stronger. "Every human culture from every continent on our world has the same fundamental belief: children must be protected, no matter the cost. It does not matter if they are human children or alien children. It does not matter if they breathe air or live underwater or grow in soil. They are children, and that makes them precious beyond any other consideration." The hall was completely silent now. Morrison could see the struggle on every face, the terrible choice between trusting their children to another species or facing the hive while divided between protection and warfare. "I cannot promise you that every human will survive this war," Morrison continued. "But I can promise you this: no human will allow harm to come to your children while we still draw breath. That is not a military promise or a political promise. That is a promise from one parent to another." The vote was closer than Morrison had expected, but it passed. In the largest logistical operation in galactic history, the young of 847 species would be relocated to a specially prepared system of worlds under human protection. The next 3 weeks were a blur of activity that challenged every human involved. Transport ships arrived from across the galaxy, carrying cargo more precious than any treasure. Young Vorthan, whose energy patterns had to be carefully monitored. Aquarian children who needed specialized water environments. Sylvani saplings that required specific soil conditions. Crystic eggs that could not be exposed to certain electromagnetic frequencies. Admiral Sarah Mitchell commanded the operation from the Hughes Guardian, a massive ship that had been converted into a mobile command center. Her fleet included every available human vessel, from military cruisers to civilian transports, all pressed into service for the largest childcare operation in known history. Dr. Maria Rodriguez found herself coordinating the psychological needs of young beings from species she had never seen before. Lieutenant Ben Parker worked around the clock designing habitats that could support hundreds of different environmental requirements. Sergeant Alex Carter trained thousands of human volunteers in the specific needs of alien children, the sanctuary. Worlds were marvels of human ingenuity and determination. Each world was designed to support multiple species simultaneously, with careful attention to their specific needs. Climate-controlled domes housed young beings who required different atmospheric conditions. Underwater cities protected aquatic children. Underground caverns sheltered species that needed darkness to develop properly. Most importantly, every sanctuary was designed with the same principle that had guided human protection efforts from the beginning. The children came first. Always. And without exception, the final battle against the hive began 3 months after the evacuation was complete. For the first time in galactic history, every species in the Federation could commit their full military strength to a single conflict. There were no divided loyalties, no warriors held back to protect scattered groups of young. The entire galaxy fought as one. The battle lasted 17 days. The hive, expecting to exploit the protective instincts of their enemies as they had in previous conquests, instead faced the coordinated fury of parents who knew their children were safe. The Korath hunted with savage efficiency, no longer distracted by protection duties. The Zephyrians created defensive barriers that allowed the fleet to advance without fear of losing ground. The Drakmari struck at hive command structures with precision that had never been possible when they were worried about civilian casualties. When the last hive ship was destroyed, the galaxy erupted in celebration. but for the humans scattered. Across the sanctuary worlds, the real work was just beginning. They had to return millions of children to their families, a task that would take months to complete. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Guardian, watching transport ships carry young beings back to their homeworlds. Each departure was bittersweet. The human protectors had grown attached to their charges. Just as the alien children had grown attached to their human caretakers, Elder Thizes approached him as the last Korath transport prepared to depart. The massive warrior looked different somehow, less fierce and more thoughtful. "Commander Morrison, I owe you an apology that is long overdue." Morrison shook his head. "Elder Thizes, you don't owe me anything. You helped make this victory possible." "No," she said firmly. "When your people first applied to join the Guardian Corps, I said you were a species of caretakers, not guardians. I meant it as an insult. I was wrong about what those words mean." She looked out at the ships carrying young Korath back to their families. "You are caretakers. You are the greatest caretakers the galaxy has ever known. And we have learned that sometimes caretakers are exactly what the universe needs."